Thanks again for tuning into this episode of the Grit Strength Podcast. We really appreciate your support. If you enjoy the messages and the content that we share, please pause this episode, go to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, and then leave us a rating or a review. That's how we get ranked on iTunes. That's how we're going to be able to spread this message to more and more people. So pause the episode, go subscribe, leave us a rating, leave us a review. Thank you again so much for all your support.
Coach Ware, you just recently got back from a trip to New York, New Jersey, went and watched Big East tournament. You were telling me a few things that you observed and learned, but what was the key thing that you just recently told me?
We live?
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
No.
Look at that. No. Got Miles Ware interviewing today. So I've said this in a couple training sessions, and I think it's important. Again, everything we talk about is important across any line of work, any industry. Athletes, I think that sports, a lot of what you learn as an athlete and in athletics can then transition you into a lot of the things that you need to learn in life. So it made me feel old, one, but two, I thought it was something that really shed some light on kind of the judgment that kids get, what first impressions can be like, especially when we have athletes that really want to play at the college level. And, during AAU or during these open gyms where coaches can come in and evaluate certain players, I've always tried to kind of understand and comprehend, what does that thought process look like, or what goes through a coach's mind as they're evaluating. Maybe they're there to evaluate one guy or girl, but then as they're there, they see somebody else that they really like. And so the thing that kind of struck me, outside of getting to watch a lot of the Big East games where there's some very high-level talent, even watching it at the Garden, you can see some of the effort level goes up even a little bit compared to what it is during the season. Just the stakes are a little bit higher. Teams playing for their NCAA tournament life. But outside of that, we ran a few different things while we were there, including a clinic on Staten Island, and there was probably 30 or so kids total that we worked with, mostly on the high school side of things. And in that high school workout, it was guys and girls, but the guy that I was working with pointed out to me, here's probably 5 to 6 players that are the best on the island, is what they call it. So the best players, or supposedly the best players on Staten Island. And New York is huge, for those of you that don't know, so is New Jersey, but there's just a toughness and an edge out there that's almost like tangible. I was telling somebody that yesterday, is that you can almost feel the toughness and the edge that some of these people operate with, and really hold true to their hearts as important. So one of the things that stood out to me, at least in my mind, that I caught myself doing, and it goes back to what college coaches I think do a lot, and really anybody who's in a decision-making position to hire people, to recruit people, I found myself within the first 5 to 10 minutes of that workout, of that clinic, judging some of the guys and girls that were there. And it was on both sides of the spectrum. There were some that I was judging that started off working really, really hard, busting their butt, and it was a positive judgment. There were also a couple, and in particular a couple of the ones that he mentioned were some of the higher level players who, to me, looked a little bit lazy, weren't quite as willing to push themselves outside their comfort zone. And I found myself in my head judging them immediately. The same thing I tell our athletes all the time. You get like 30 seconds, maybe a minute at the most, to make that impression on a college coach, especially in an AAU setting. It's tough. It's really hard to make a good first impression, and especially to get that coach to want to continue to look at you, continue to stay at that game, and continue to evaluate you. I found myself doing that. Again, like I said earlier, it made me feel really old, but two, it just made me understand and realize how important it is. And I've always thought this was important, but even more so finding myself judging some kids, right or wrong, indifferent, I don't know, but I just wasn't planning on feeling this way or learning this from the trip, but I did. I found myself judging these kids from the get-go. It was an hour and a half long workout, and after the first 10 to 15 minutes, when they got maybe more comfortable with how hard I wanted them to go, they picked it up. And so I told them the same thing once I got done. But it's really important to understand you don't get an hour and a half a lot of times. You don't get that significant amount of time to prove to somebody that you're worthy of an opportunity. Sometimes it's from the very get-go. So it makes it so much more important that you're the same person all the time. You continue to raise your level every chance that you get. The last thing you ever want somebody to say about you is that you don't work hard, followed by that you're soft. And to me, both of those things go hand in hand. If you don't work hard, you're soft. If you're soft, you probably don't work hard, or you don't like the hard work piece of it. You want everything to be comfortable. You want everything to be easy. So I urge everybody out there listening and everybody out there watching to really think about that. Again, whatever field or industry you're in, if you're an athlete, whatever sport you play, you never ever want to take the chance or give somebody the opportunity to judge you in a negative way, especially for something you can't control. You can't control how tall you're going to be. You can't necessarily control the gifts that God's given you, or the skill level, the natural talent that you are given. Skill level, I think, can be developed, but talent is something that you are given. You can always make up for that gap with your effort level, but I think what's really important is sometimes you're not given, or you don't know when the opportunity is going to present itself. You don't know when somebody's watching. You never know when somebody's watching. If you can train yourself to be the same way every time, raise your level every single time you're out there, and always, always, always be pushing yourself as hard as you can possibly go, then it doesn't matter when that situation presents itself. If you're somebody who picks and chooses, again, for example, like in a Big East tournament, if you're somebody who maybe all year long, for whatever your high school, college program, just kind of goes through the motions, especially if you're pretty talented and you maybe don't have to try as hard to be a good player, it's really hard to turn that switch and crank it up when you need to. And again, sometimes you never know. At the college level, you never know if a pro scout's in the building. People judge immediately, and the more coaches that I talk to, the more they judge that stuff based on this premise. I got a call recently from another college coach who was calling about somebody that I don't coach. I just train the kid. He trains with me a couple days a week. The coach wanted to know if in that training environment, even outside of the school practices and the AAU practices and the games, what that effort level looked like in a skill development workout. I thought that was pretty powerful, because that historically hasn't always been the case. Coaches don't call trainers. So my point is this: always control what you can. I talk about that all the time. But on top of that, make sure it is an all the time thing. If you're going through a 60-minute workout, make sure that you're busting it for the full 60 minutes. And even if you throw in the extra 5 minutes you get there to do stuff beforehand and 5 minutes to do stuff afterwards as you wind down, now you're talking about executing for 70 minutes out of what most people would consider a 60-minute workout. Same thing with practice. If you've got a 2-hour window at practice, if you show up early, you stay late, maybe it's 2.5 hours, but you better go as hard as you can the whole time, because there are going to be people that judge you. I found myself caught in that, and you don't ever, ever, ever want somebody to judge you in a negative way based on things you can control, like your effort.
Thanks again for tuning into this episode. Again, you have no idea how much I appreciate the love and support that all of you have shown to our businesses and to this podcast. If you don't mind, if you didn't already, please go to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, leave us a rating, leave us a review. It helps us get ranked. It helps us reach more and more people with the messages that we're trying to spread. So again, go back to iTunes, subscribe, leave a rating, leave us a review. We really, really appreciate everything you're doing for us and all the support you've shown.